Come on, please work.
It says live on YouTube. I'll check my
I'm streaming live.
There it is. We're up. I'll DM the link to you guys.
It's just the YouTube thing up top, right? It's just the link.
Yeah. But in case you're... All right. We'll let people file in. How's everyone doing?
Ready to go, baby. Draft Eve.
Yeah.
Got the butterflies in the stomach. Got too much money on this, so
yeah, it's like a weird draft to have a lot of money on because there's not much information, I guess, for players. But did you finish your final mock draft, Scott and Evan?
Well, I'm trying to get I'm trying to get mine finished up right now. There's a lot of news coming in. You've got like the Falcons trying to move up and make some moves and things like that. So just trying to not make the wrong move and have a bunch of dominoes fall after that.
I apologize for how red my face is. It's going to get redder throughout the show. It kind of runs in our family. And then I biked 32 miles just before this broadcast. So
Badass.
32.
My body's just not reacting well to it.
Let's start with Daniel Jeremiah's mock draft.
Let's do it.
It's being broadcast live right now on NFL Network.
Yep.
The link to the mock draft is out. So, Joe, you want to talk about it?
Yeah, I mean, first things first, like I would say, no surprises up towards, obviously we know the first two. He has Okudah 3. That's kind of the first tipping point there. So I think if they don't trade it, obviously it's Okudah or Brown 3. Wirfs, he's kind of moved back in. We were on Wills last week. I heard Charles Robinson phrase it real nicely that Wirfs is a Gettleman pick. Wills would be a Judge pick. He's got Wirfs finalized as 4. So I definitely think it's going to be one of those two. The wild part of it, the most wild, is he's got a 4 wide receiver run from starting with the Raiders of CeeDee Lamb, going Jefferson as wide receiver 2 at 13, Judy to the Bucks at 14, Ruggs to the Broncos at 15. Which would be a wild one. That's the first time I've seen Jefferson wide receiver 2 in any mock. You guys think that's a realistic possibility? That would surprise me if he went above Ruggs and Judy there. I know some of the Judy injury info the last 24 hours. There's been some skepticism around it. Jefferson wide receiver 2, and to any possibility there. You think? What are you guys feeling on that?
Well, definitely when Dr. Chow comes on, we'll talk to him about Jerry Judy. I think he's got some actual concern about that. But yeah, I mean that four consecutive receiver run would be nuts, man.
Yeah, no, that's wild. And then, yeah, I mean, a couple of surprises on the back end. He's got Kmet now to the Patriots. That would surprise me. I know Schrager had the Patriots taking a tight end, Harrison Bryant, in one of his earlier mocks. Now Jeremiah's final one's got Kmet. I know Chris Sims had the tweet, and he's, a guy that's a little bit connected to a couple of organizations where he almost guaranteed that he would go first round. Rager sneaks in there to New Orleans, and then Ayuk on the back into Green Bay. So that's how many total offensive linemen here? I think he's got 5 tackles and Ruiz going. So that would be 6 in there. So, yeah, I mean, a couple of the last second shockers there with how high he had Jefferson and then Kmet to the Pats. But other than that, it's mostly guys talked about in the range of the top 40. Just a little bit of a mix here. Derek Brown falling to 9 as well. Has the Falcons trading up. All the talk about them being super aggressive. So
we got a good amount of people streaming now, so maybe we just like reset the show. It's like our NFL draft props live stream. My name is Drew Silva. I read about baseball for Roto World. If you didn't watch our show on Saturday night, I know very little about football. I'm kind of representing like the casual bettor here. I'm also looking at our YouTube live stream as we chat and getting questions from anyone who's watching. We already have a few in there. Evan Silva, that's my brother, knows a little bit about football, I guess. Scott Smith, a mock draft maven, and then Joey Kanish, whether that's his real name or not, is a sports betting guru.
TBD.
Yeah,
maybe. Yeah.
Well,
if I can acquire the rights, maybe.
Yeah, we'll find out. So we finally got this going. And we have a good amount of people watching now.
I like it. I think we can kind of, if we want to kind of reset and go with that, we can follow up on some of the bets we talked about, but kind of start it
At
on
quarterback
the same thing. Yeah, run it back from the top and just go right through. We can talk about any last second adders and then kind of what the latest info is pick by pick. So a lot's changed since we streamed this last time.
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, obviously at quarterback, the conversation is who's going to go second and third, Tua or Herbert. Herbert's a little closer. I see that Tua is still the favorite. I think that might have flipped for like a little bit at some point over the last 3 days. But Tua is back as the favorite to go second after Burrow. But Herbert's close to him. I forget what I got. I got Tua as the third quarterback taken at plus 400. That was like 2.5 weeks ago at this point. Now it's not that good of odds.
What's interesting is that that the day was filled with like draft insiders essentially forecasting that the Dolphins are going to take an offensive tackle at number 5, and that's Barry Jackson from the Miami Herald. That's Tony Pauline, who is really, really plugged in and has been for many years. And Mike Lombardi has also hinted at that. But yet in Daniel Jeremiah's mock draft, he has the Dolphins taking Justin Herbert. I'm looking at the right mock draft here, right? Yeah. Okay. So Daniel Jeremiah just came out with his. Daniel Jeremiah is probably the best like mainstream media mock draft, creator of mock drafts, and has friends all across the league, and was offered multiple GM jobs and stayed at NFL Network anyways as the Chargers color analyst. He's really, really close to the team. So anything that he says about the Chargers is like, bing, bing, bing. He's also like best friends with Joe Douglas, who is the GM of the Jets. So anything he says about the Jets, it's like, green light there. And he has the Jets taking Mekhi Becton. That's where I'm going to have Mekhi Becton going to the Jets in my final mock draft too. And I'm going to have Tua going to the Chargers, but I'm going to have it I think I'm going to have it in a trade up with the Lions. But I don't know, what are you Scott? Scott's one of the most accurate mock drafters over the last several years. Are you still on Herbert to the Dolphins?
I'm still kind of teetering, but as of right now, if you just look at the information that came out today, what doesn't make sense to me, and it was reported earlier that the Dolphins passed to as far as like his physical and his medicals earlier in February. So for me, when you start looking at the scouts and hearing a lot of the guys in the know and industry talk, the big differentiator between Tua wasn't the talent. all scouts for the most part seem to love Tua. At least the majority of them do from a talent standpoint over Justin Herbert. It's always been the medicals. What you've heard is that Tua from a skill set is up there with Joe Burrow. If he was healthy, he'd be sitting there battling with Joe Burrow to be the #1 overall pick. So for me, and Armando Segura, covers the Miami Dolphins a lot. He actually came out today and said that the Dolphins, that Tua is going to be the pick for the Dolphins, and that's what seems to make the most sense to me if the medicals are clear right now. So right now, I'll probably be finalizing my mock draft here before midnight. But as of right now, on my spreadsheet, I have Tua to the Dolphins at 5.
It's interesting that Barry Jackson writes for the Miami Herald and Armando Salguero writes for the Miami Herald, and Armando Salguero thinks it's going to be Tua at 5, and Barry Jackson thinks it's going to be Andrew Thomas, offensive lineman out of Georgia, at 5.
Yeah, and the news that came out today,
it just goes to show how little anybody knows about this shit. Honestly.
Yeah, I mean the news makes sense to a standpoint of I could see Miami wanting to trade back up to number 3 with the other 2 picks that they have in the first round. That would make sense to me. But it's having to find a dance partner in Detroit that is willing to move back that far for the proper compensation whenever they have just as many needs as what the Dolphins seem to have.
So Tua right now over under draft position is 5.5. The under is -160. The over is +120. I don't know. I don't know what to believe there. I have him going as the 3rd quarterback, so that's what I'm rooting for. Do we want to talk about Jordan Love at all? Is there any kind of inkling on him? Let me look up what his over under draft position was. He was kind of a hot topic on our last show.
None, and that's one. I mean, I've been trumpeting the Love over since they first came out, and even as of 19.5 from the other day from our first show. Jeremiah's last mock here, he doesn't have him going first round. I thought all along there was a decent shot he'd fall out of the first round. I think the earliest that you would even see him realistically is in the 20s. If one of the teams that's looking for a future year quarterback grabs him. But I never see you. It was hard for me to fathom that an RPO quarterback out of the Mountain West that threw 17 picks was ever realistically going to go at the top of this draft. So I think any over in the teens, if you can find a 19.5 that are still out there, even if it's a little juice, I'd still play over. If you want to, even if there's you want to take it in the 20s, take a plus money over, I still sprinkle on that. I think he falls out of the first round, and at best, he's a mid-20s, late 20s guy.
Yeah, at Bovada at least, he's -160 at over 19.5, which is not great, but not terrible for what you guys are saying, and for Daniel Jeremiah to have him out of the first round completely.
I would still. You would need to tell me where is he going to go? Let's say
Tony Pauline has the Dolphins taking Jordan Love at 18. So there's your worst nightmare. Right?
That would be the spot. If they pass on QB at 5 and then it comes back around and Herbert and Tua get scooped up, do they go Love at 18? That's the scenario where it loses. I would be okay still laying -160 that scenario doesn't play out. Is the fact that it's hard for me to envision that if the Dolphins have their QB in this draft, that they're going to pass on him at 5. I think it was something that was rumored the Giants last year with Daniel Jones doing. If you have your QB, decide you're going to take him with the first pick and not leave it to chance that a guy that's further down your board or that maybe the original guy is still there. It's just not a pattern of behavior you've seen in the NFL in past years.
Before we get off quarterbacks, Alexis Gomez from the chat asks, Tua at 3rd overall is +450. Is there any chance that a team would trade up into that 3rd overall slot to get him?
That's what I've been thinking I'm going to have happen in my final mock draft. I mean, I think that the Lions want to trade out. I think the Chargers want to make sure they get ahead of the Dolphins. I think the Chargers like Tua. Tony Pauline thinks the Chargers like Justin Herbert, and that's who he had in his final mock draft. But yeah, I mean it's not. I think it's not a bad long shot bet. It's you need some things that are significant to fall into place for it to hit. But hey, I mean, what do we have better to do right now?
The other thing is how you set yourself up. We talked about Derek Brown last show. There was a ton of massive prices out there. If the Lions keep the pick, it's going to be Okudah or Brown. I mean, probably a coin flip between the two. I'd lean a little bit to Okudah being the pick over Brown. But if you set yourself up to have a couple of nice prices on either of those guys, then you can take a little sprinkle of a trifecta of, Burrow, Young, Tua, or, sprinkle a little Tua, just himself go to third overall. So it's all about where you're set up portfolio wise or how much you're invested. But if you're already set up on the Lions on either a play on Okudah or a long shot on Brown or both, it doesn't hurt to take a little sprinkle there of the long shot that there's going to be a trade up to 3 for the quarterback.
One thing I noticed from the last show we did on Saturday night to this show is for Derek Brown to go third overall, he was not on the board on Bovada on Saturday. Now he's plus 500. I got him at plus 1,800 2.5 weeks ago. So I feel good about that. Maybe it won't happen, but it seems like it's becoming less of a long shot.
Well, Scott and I have really been kind of on this, so I wanted to, and I'm starting to lose confidence in it. I mean, not that I always felt like Okudah was the favorite just to end up with the Lions, whether it be at 3 or 6 or, even 4 or whatever. But I wanted to be a little bit contrarian with my mock because there's so much groupthink about Jeff Okudah. And I mean, if I get it wrong, it's water under the bridge. Like I'm trying to take a chance to win the freaking competition. Right. So, and also like it was like such long odds and it made some sense. And the Lions are a secretive organization that does not let information get out. And I think it's just people connecting dots really that is driving it. But I mean, it does make sense. Okudah to the line does make sense. But where is your confidence level on that as we speak today? I still want to have Derek Brown in my final mock just to be a little contrarian because I know that like 95% of the mocks are going to have Okudah there.
I think one of the other things you look at is when's the last time a defensive back has been drafted this high in the top 3? I mean, you have to go back and even Champ Bailey's not that high, So what are exactly the Lions getting in Okudah? Who's going to be the bigger difference maker between Okudah and Derek Brown? For me, this is just as much of a toss-up as whether or not Miami's going to draft Tua or Herbert. I think you still have some play there. A lot of people are leaning to Okudah, but look, I've heard the rumors and read the notes that a lot of people on the coaching staff like Derek Brown. So I think it's a situation where scouts like Derek Brown. I think there's people within the Lions organization that like Derek Brown, but I think overall you could still see it end up being Okudah. I think one of the things that I heard on Derek Brown that the Lions organization seems to love was that Derek Brown was the team captain there at Auburn, whereas at Ohio State, Okudah was not that guy. So it's going to be some interesting just takes there as far as what Detroit's going to do. I still like, as far as a betting standpoint, having some long odds there with Derek Brown there at 3. And, as far as mock drafts go, being contrarian and hitting on some picks is what you're going to need to win them.
No, Scott, you mentioned it on the last stream we had of at early round 2 when the Lions pick again, you can get a cornerback that can play. You cannot get a defensive lineman, an interior defensive lineman that can play. You've got 2 day 1 impact starters on the defensive line in the entire draft in Brown and Kinlaw, and then it's a massive fall off to a guys that you're probably taking shots on in round 3, 4, 5. So if you want a day 1 starter on an interior defensive line, it's Brown right there, and then you can come back in round 2 and get a guy that can come in and play, nickel or cornerback too, when they already signed Trufant in the offseason, paid him some money for a couple of years, and you can get a starter at the top of round 2 in a deeper cornerback draft. So that made a lot of sense to me as far as if you want to address a need and in an organization where Quinn and Patricia probably don't have that much time left to win. So if they want to fill a couple of spots with a couple of starters, it's defensive line, interior D-line first, then corner. So, but we'll see what happens there. But I agree. It's maybe 50-50, 60-40 if they keep the pick. So if you got Brown at 15-1, 20-1, 30-1, you're sitting in a real nice spot there if the Lions hold the pick.
All right, so we'll move to wide receiver next, but Ivan, one of the first questions in the chat was about over under 1.5 technical difficulties during the first round broadcast. And I thought it was a joke, but on Bovada, they have a prop. How many times will the broadcast experience technical difficulties? It's 4.5 over under. Under
4.5. Wow.
under 4.5 is a heavy favorite right now. But
Wait, under 4.5 is a heavy favorite?
yeah, it's minus 350.
Oh my god, man.
You got to be careful. As a guy that's bet on a bunch of random shit over the years, you've got to be careful of like what in the grading, what are
qualifies?
they going to consider a technical difficulty? Like
Yeah.
if there's a little bit like, if whenever you're on a stream, you might cut out for, a half a second. Does that count as a technical difficulty? Does it got to drop in full? Does it got to, like the broadcast have to go to commercial or something? So to me, that one's a little bit of a gray area. I know they ran through a few preemptive drafts, but in the end, this is a bunch of old dudes from their house trying to stream it. So yeah, but I would lean under there. But again, this is one where the grading gets a little could get a little shady. So I'd probably steer away from it.
All right, let's move to wide.
Based on
Go ahead.
reports of what happened during the Monday's telecasted mock draft or teleconference mock draft. Man, I would hammer that over. We're getting a 6-hour first round.
I have a feeling there's going to be some issues, but maybe they'll just like cut off the broadcast for a bit and try to figure it all out.
I just want one of these GMs to be like, doing something illegal and they forget to hit their mute or they, you know what I'm saying?
Who would be the GM most likely? No, let's not get into it. Let's not do
we
that.
can't do
Let's not
that.
tarnish reputations. All right, to wide receiver, there's a lot of questions about O-line. If you guys want to just jump into that right away, or should we do wide receiver first?
Let's do O-line because what we had
Yeah.
touched on last time was the Giants taking Wills, and then Jeremiah has him in his latest mock with Wirfs. There's been a lot of Wirfs talk. Where are you guys at with the Giants pick at 4? I think it's going to be an offensive tackle, almost assuredly, but which one?
I think Wirfs, Lombardi, Mike Lombardi, Jordan Renan, who covers the Giants for ESPN, and now Daniel Jeremiah all have Tristan Wirfs 4 to the Giants. Let me look where Pauline went with that number 4 pick. Wirfs as well. So yeah, Wirfs. I think Wirfs is the guy.
Yeah, I've actually went ahead and moved Wirfs as well into my spot there for the Giants. And what they said earlier, talking about, Jedrick Wills being more of a judge pick and, Wirfs being more of a Gettleman pick makes a lot of sense. And then, yeah, I think Wirfs also gives a little bit more of a safety net to where if things don't quite work out at tackle, you can shift them inside to guard and still get some usage out of them. So I think that plays into it. He was also a little bit more athletic than what Jedrick Wills is. So Wirfs makes a lot of sense there at 4 as well.
No, from a betting standpoint, if you listen to us, the first stream, Wills was 4-1, 5-1 at the lowest on 3-1. So if you scooped some of that, now come back, Wirfs was around plus 300 some places. He's plus money, almost everywhere to go to the Giants at worst, plus 125, plus 150. Now you come back and take a piece of Wirfs for, probably usually around the same stake of whatever you got on Wills. Because I would say very comfortable that it's going to be an offensive tackle and it's likely between one of those two. So if you set yourself up with a piece of Wills, between 3-1 and 5-1, now come back, take a piece of Wirfs. And I think you're sitting pretty there unless the Giants do something, crazy as far as a trade back. But even if they trade back a few spots, I think that guy's still there sitting for him and still take him.
A popular question in the chat is about the total offensive linemen drafted in round 1. The over-under is 6.5. Over 6.5 is minus 170. So that implies 7 offensive linemen will be drafted in the first round. I looked at it Saturday. I think it was, I don't know. I feel like it was flip-flopped or it was like at least a lot closer. Under 6.5 is plus 130. This is on Bovada.
Yeah, I thought we had 5.5 on Saturday whenever we looked at it and
maybe
talked
that's
about it then.
that's got to yeah.
Yeah, and let me tell you something. If 6 linemen don't go in this first round, you're not going to hear from me again. I'm going to be somewhere, in the Mexican city, begging for food on the corner or something like this, because there's no. I don't see. I laid a lot of money on the over 5.5. I think you're going to see 4 tackles in the top 14. I think we would all agree that.
Top
And then
11,
you've got
top
18
11, I think.
picks where you've got 4 to 5 other projected potential first round tackles, plus the interior linemen. Of a lot of mocks have Ruiz going; he's a first round player. A couple of other interior guys have gotten some latest buzz. I would still lay it at 6.5 up to minus 200. But I laid a good chunk at 5.5. I think 8 is more likelier than 5, and potentially 9. Where are you guys at on it?
Pauline has 7 and Jeremiah has 7. And I think that's even conservative. I wrote an article on Establish the Run the other day, how I think that offensive linemen are just going to fly off the board, especially if this scenario comes to fruition where the Dolphins take an offensive tackle at number 5. Like, man, there could be 8 offensive linemen, so, and I think it's a smart, I think it makes sense with the year. We, adjusting for what's going on in America right now, I think that offensive linemen they're way safer picks than wide receivers and cornerbacks for that matter. Over the past several years, the hit rate on wide receivers in the first round has been atrocious. And offensive line is just, it's a safer pick. And, I think it doesn't draw criticism from fans and media as much. And the offensive line protects the most valuable player on the field. And I think in a year like this, where there's, not complete player profiles on every player, there were no pro days, there was no pro day circuit, there was no combine recheck medically. And I think that teams are going to want to hit singles and doubles, and offensive linemen are singles and doubles. And if you get, 3 or 4 good ones, like, you have a really good offensive line all of a sudden.
Yeah, Evan, one of the things that I like to do, I actually like to look at a lot of the scouting publications. And one of the things that I use a lot is at The Athletic, you can go look at the consensus big board. They aggregate over 63 different scouting publications. And so just looking at that, along with the guys over at NFL Rough Draft, if you sit there and you layer, all the players that should be drafted within the first round, right now I count 8 offensive linemen just going through, and that's 7 tackles, and then Cesar Ruiz, the center out of Michigan, being the 8th offensive lineman. The one guy that you might kind of, be on the fence about is Isaiah Wilson going to be one of the guys that moves in? And he's been a guy that's rumored, to go to Tennessee, to be a right tackle there on that back part of the draft. So I think over 6.5, I think it's a good bet, and it's one that I'm willing to take.
There was a great quote. You mentioned the scouting in the one of the McGinn articles from an anonymous scout, and he said, this is basically simple supply demand. He said 28 of the 32 teams don't feel great about one of their 2 tackles in the situation. So you've got almost the entire, I don't think there's a position in the league that's even close to the amount of demand needed as tackle position. And you can get a wide receiver in round 2 and round 3 and round 4 in this draft that you think can come in and have an impact. There's going to be a run on tackles, and you got to spend either a first round or a high second round on an offensive lineman in this draft, or there's going to be a big fall off, or there's going to be a run on them. So I agree. I think 7 is even conservative. 8 and upwards of 9 would not surprise me at all.
Yeah, the one downside that you need to have a little bit of caution with is you've heard about the rumors with Trent Williams. He's been back and forth with the Redskins, and there's been some news coming out today that the Redskins are trying to move him before the draft actually starts. I think that would be the lone prohibitive thing towards kind of causing that line to be on that bubble and have some trouble. Word is that Cleveland was one of their teams that were interested, and they also had some talk with Tampa Bay and a few other teams. So that's the one prohibitive thing that could kind of drop it a little bit and maybe work against you, but that's still yet to be seen.
Yeah, just to read off my own wagers, I took Andrew Thomas plus 700 to be the first offensive lineman. That was a while ago. And then Jedrick Wills at plus 175. I think I took that on Saturday night. So I don't know. I think you guys think Wirfs in general will be the first one to go, or you think it could be kind of a toss-up?
Yeah, that seems to be consensus. Now, the trap would be if the Giants decide to trade back, and then the Dolphins end up scooping a tackle. The rumors that they like Thomas, and Thomas could hit as the first offensive tackle off the board there. But if the Giants hold the pick, was likely going to be Wirfs or Wills, and right now, every respective publication, seems to be leaning towards Wirfs as the guy there.
Let me look up what his Bovada over under is. It doesn't matter. Anyway, let's just move on to wide receivers. So right now, I'm sorry, I'm looking up. Bovada's being weird. They're actually like updating their odds in real time. It looks like. I think
a lot of people are watching this and betting it as they speak. So yes, that tends to go a little quick when they're getting fired on as it's happening. So
I mean, you were pointing out on Twitter that they like just took a bunch of stuff off there, like as we were recording. Do you think we could really have that big of an impact?
A lot of this is kind of in the granularity of things, but a lot of sites have like a trigger where if a certain bet gets hit a lot within a short period of time frame, it pulls it off the board. So
wow.
That's if 10 people or 20 people all hit it within a couple of minutes, it's usually got an auto pull to get off there.
They'll pull it off and just kind of reevaluate it.
Yes. Yeah. And it goes to a trader. They look at it and say, oh, why did 20 people hit it? And it's because the Silver Boys and Smith and Knish said to do it. So, that's.
I think you're kidding yourself, guys. I'm joining in here if you don't think they watch. And especially like I've had the fortune of talking to some of the guys, and they have all these screens, and they even say Pro Football Doc, we follow what you say here, and we have marked bettors that that are movers and shakers, and they're watching what's going on. Especially, there's no reason for people to be hitting drafts at this time of night except your show, so they watch. You guys make a difference. They watch.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Yeah. You introducing them. There you go.
Yeah, Dr. David Chow. I mean, everybody knows who he is at this point. Yeah. Longtime Chargers team doctor. You remember when Antonio Gates, all those foot issues. Phillip Rivers playing through the torn ACL in the playoff game. That's Dr. Chow. So welcome to the show. We want to pick your brain about, I think, at least 3 specific players, and let's just start off with Tua, because where he lands it just has such a massive impact on the rest of the draft. There have been some reporters that have talked about him falling out of the top 20. Like, I'm not even kidding you. And I mean, it's hard for us to imagine. There was an article that is done by Bob McGinn every year, actually. And he polled 18 league executives and personnel men from around the league and asked them to say their concern level about the durability of Tua on a 1 to 10 scale, and he averaged out their answers, and it was 7.6. So, and that's like major concern to me. But what do you think about Tua, Doc?
Well, understand, and this, Evan, and I think most of the guys here know this, but for your listeners or watchers, I'm only commenting on the medical side of what's going on. I'm not commenting about other things. I'm not commenting about his skill set, the scouting side, which you guys do. And I'm not going to the Wonderlic in terms of what's going on. All I'm saying is this, and this is my home run sentence, I suppose. If you consider, or a GM considers, or if I were a GM and I considered him the very first pick of the draft before the hip, and that's where I put his talent level, I don't see how he falls that far. I think he still is in the top 10 of the draft. That's a considerable fall from number 1 to number 6 or 8 or 9 or 10. That's a considerable fall, but I don't see the hip being that way. And part of my reasoning is, maybe I'm biased. When I was in the NFL, more towards the beginning, the late 90s and the early 2000s, GMs would say to me, can this guy be our left tackle for the next 15 years? Well, towards the end of my career, into the teens, 2010 and later, it was, can he get to a first contract? So in a quarterback-driven league, if you have him as the top pick of the draft, and with this hip, look, there are, as long as he avoids avascular necrosis, which so far he has, I think that he gets downgraded for the hip in terms of arthritis, but not out of the top 10. Now, if you're saying we've studied him and we don't think he's as good, and there are other issues with him, that's a different story than just by injury itself. And what I don't like, and I will try and look, people have accused me of working with Lee Steinberg or supporting Tua in some way. I'm full disclosure, I met the kid down in Miami at the Super Bowl at Radio Row. Super nice kid, rooting for him, his family, his parents were there, but I have no financial ties. I know Lee Steinberg, there's nothing here other than that. As a matter of fact, I've called Tua out. When he said during his pro day, he said, I'm 100%. I said, no, you're not. I can tell in the video, you're not 100%. And I've called them out when their camp has said the ankles are stronger now because of the tight ropes. I say, not true. They're not stronger because of the tight ropes, because they always come loose. But on the other hand, to call him injury prone is not correct. Yes, he's had 3 surgeries in the last 2 years, but 2 of them were high ankle sprain surgeries that shouldn't be counted against him. We all know Patrick Mahomes in week 1 and week 5 had a high ankle sprain and went on to win the Super Bowl without that surgery. The Giants running back, Saquon Barkley, couldn't even put weight on it, on crutches and a boot. No surgery, came back in 4 weeks. Tua walked off the field, had surgery, and came back. His recovery process has been good, but I think it's a disservice to count him as injury prone. Now, if you guys say, look, to me, there's a big difference between injury prone and prone to injury. I would argue every quarterback that runs and is mobile and extends plays is prone to injury. From Aaron Rodgers to going back to Tony Romo and look, who doesn't get hurt? Brett is Phillip Rivers. Cam Newton, the biggest, strongest quarterback we know, gets hurt because he goes out of the pocket and extends plays. So if you want to accuse Tua of being prone to injury because he exposes himself by extending plays, that's a different argument than injury prone. And that prone to injury nature was there before the hip. And that's why I say, if you call him the number 1 pick before the hip, you should still have him pretty high now. But if you didn't like him for other reasons, that's a different story. So that I can go into it more, but happy to take your questions. That's my thought on Tua in any case.
Dr. Chow, following that up, one of the questions I have as a team doctor, the news came out today that Miami did actually pass Tua there in February with his medicals. With the information that you've seen, the workout saying that he was not fully healthy, as his camp was trying to reiterate, as far as the inability of teams to do a follow-up re-medical check that's normally part of the combine, how much of that do you think lays into where some of these teams are factoring him in, especially when it comes to Miami? If they passed him in February, do you think they would still feel comfortable not being able to recheck him here as they would normally do?
Well, you have to figure out that there's a difference between passing and failing and having a lower medical grade isn't all the same. In other words, very few players that go to the combines truly fail. Why is that? Because if you fail, to me, you cannot play football and you cannot draft this guy. For a guy like Tua, at some point, he's draftable, right? Now, is it at the 5th pick or the 10th pick or in the 5th round? Certainly, he's draftable and can play football. So you can't put a failing grade on him. You could lower his grade. And to me, I always said your medical grade is like a 40 time. Some guys run a 4.3 and some guys run a 4.8. Now, if you put a medical grade of, let's say, 4.8, saying that he's slow, if the GM says he's got game speed and he compares better and I like his intangibles, he still can be picked. So it doesn't at all surprise me that Tua passed the physical. But that doesn't mean Miami doctors or the Miami GM has down-ticked him some because of the hip or other things. It just means, yes, he is draftable. The question is, at what point in time is he draftable? And it doesn't surprise me that he, quote, passed the physical. And by the way, whatever team he ends on, all this, he should sit a year to get his hip better. He doesn't need that time. He's not 100% now, but he will be by the time the season starts. And the main reason that he will not play week 1 and not play probably very much this year is, number one, we all know the NFL's prisoners of the moment. Patrick Mahomes sat, so that's the model. Lamar Jackson sat a good part of his rookie season. That may be the model. But the bigger reason he won't play early in the season is not his hip. His hip will be ready. It's because there's no off-season program. And it's very difficult for a college quarterback to learn an NFL system and have command of it. And who knows, there may not be preseason games or be very limited preseason games. I think that's the impediment to Tua playing rather than more so than his hip starting in 2020.
And we saw Sean Payton, head coach of the Saints, come out and say, "We're not. It doesn't matter if we get approved for off-season workouts. We're not having them. You know, stay in shape. You know, be ready for training camp." Let's move on to another player, and it's Jerry Jeudy. I know you kind of indicated some concern. I know go to ProFootballDoc.com to get just a rundown on every dude with an injury concern. But Jerry Jeudy, there have been concerns about his knees, or at least one of his knees that surfaced within the last couple of days. Now, Daniel Jeremiah still has him going number 14 to the Bucks. Tony Pauline still has him going number 15 to Denver. So he's not showing up as a guy that is falling in the draft in guys who historically have good hit rates in terms of their mock drafts. But what is the concern here with Jerry Jeudy, Doc?
Well, this is something that just hit the radar screen very recently, and it's today that I updated at ProFootballDoc.com. We have 40 plus people there, all the top guys in the draft, and if you instead of scrolling, just go to the search bar and type in the name, and you can find the thoughts. Jerry Jeudy is this. He wasn't even on my radar screen. We didn't even do a medical evaluation analysis on him until we posted today, when it came out that Adam Schefter said something and you guys probably knew this ahead of time. I don't follow it like you guys, but when Schefter says something, he said something, I think, to Philadelphia radio, that some teams had downgraded him because of his knee. And I didn't actually see much information. But earlier in the day today, Ian Rappaport tweeted out something, and he tweeted out a picture of the letter written in April from his surgeon at Alabama detailing the 2018 knee scope. Now, on surface value, all I had before this was he had a spring knee scope. He returned to get 1,300 yards and 14 touchdowns that year in 2018. In 2019, had 1,100 plus yards and 10 touchdowns. A little bit lower, but probably getting doubled all the time, right? And but still did very well and played 28 straight games after the knee scope. So you think he's fine. So that's what I thought too. But when his own doctor put out that letter, he was actually very specific. And what he said, the keys were, he said, lateral meniscus, which is always worse than medial, and lost most of the, and I'm paraphrasing, most of the posterior horn, which would mean you lose your hoop stresses and you lose the shock absorber nature of the knee. Now, he did not say that his knee was perfect. He said he hasn't required treatment. So what that means is it's been holding up. But there is worry for arthritis. It's hard for me to compare his knee versus Tua's hip, but there is worry for arthritis on both those guys. And so you can see my thoughts in detail at the site. But essentially what I'm saying is, once again, if you have two wide receivers that you have rated equally, and one is healthy and one is Jerry Jeudy, I'm telling the GM to take the other guy because of, everyone's a prisoner of the moment. Todd Gurley factor, for lack of a better word. That's not to mean you can't take him. The Patriots drafted Sony Michel as a rookie in the 32nd pick, first round, and rode him to a Super Bowl victory, even though they all knew he had an arthritic knee already. Jerry Jeudy's knee may not be arthritic today. It will get there at a faster rate. So that's where the comparison is to Tua. And there's some weight. I mean, I think if he was like borderline or maybe the top pick in the draft, you guys are doing this fantastic stuff related to gambling and so forth in the picks. If he's really close to being the top or maybe barely was favored, I think this is enough to knock him down where he's not the top wide receiver chosen. Just medical evaluation. You guys do the rest.
Question from my friend Tim Larkin, who keeps texting me about Javon Kinlaw and his medical reports.
He texted me too. He's like, ask Dr. Chow about Javon Kinlaw.
Well, just to lay out the gambling terms, he's got him going over 13.5 as a draft slot. And I guess the argument there is that he is a bigger talent than that, but he's had a lot of lower body injuries and a back injury, 2 knee injuries, a labrum repaired in one of his hips. And I guess the combine MRIs showed wear and tear. We don't really know what that means, but I don't know. Flagged as at a risk for arthritis is apparently the verbiage.
Yeah, and you know, I think that's a risk for a lot of guys and a lot of bigger guys, and certainly he's a talented player, but I don't watch film like you guys do. In terms of his injuries, the hip labrum tear surgery he had before, and he's already played through it, and so there's already some lower risk. Yes, long term, once again, is he a guy that'll be you know, double-digit years in the league? Maybe not. The current worry is he didn't perform, I think, at the Senior Bowl, and he had some issues with his knee, and it may be some tendonitis. And tendonitis is normally something you don't worry about because it's not structural and it gets better. But we all see, let's say, D Ford with his tendonitis. He missed most of the season with the 49ers with it. So I think Javon Kinlaw is someone who I would say has a yellow light, not a red light, but a yellow light. Like, you just got to pause and look at it. If you say he's a superior talent, I think he's draftable where your GM wants to draft him. But, you know, if there's an equivalent player, once again, you might want to go elsewhere. It's sort of slow down before you cross the intersection on him. But he is perfectly draftable.
Good stuff. Yeah, there have been like some whispers that Kinlaw, who a lot of people have projected as high as number 9 to the Jaguars, might slip into the back half of the first round. He goes pretty early in General Jeremiah's mock draft. I think he has the Falcons trading up for Kinlaw at number no. Is the I don't know. He's going.
He's got Bryad Brown at 9, and then Kinlaw falling back a bit.
Okay, so yeah, I don't know. It's just a big difference of opinion on him, but I think those are the 3 biggest injury situations we have in the first round. Can you guys think of any other ones?
Brandon Ayuk was one that had he
Ayuk.
caught some late buzz here with, you know, jumping into the first round, but then within the last, you know, you've heard a little bit about teams potentially having some injury concern on him. Was he one of the guys you were able to profile, and any concerns there?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, it's unique times with the COVID and the travel restrictions, and I think there's some up and down sides to it. Look, the bad news about Brandon Ayuk is you never want to have surgery at this time and you get on the radar screen. But the thing is that GMs get nervous about Tua because the biggest example of his hip is Bo Jackson, and it was like his career ended. But as long as Tua doesn't get avascular necrosis, he can keep playing. Then people talk about Dennis Pitta, and it makes GMs nervous because they're not doctors. Look, I had a player in San Diego who dislocated his hip, returned to play in the same season and caught a touch. He dislocated in the preseason and caught a touchdown pass in week 10. So depends on, there are people who come back, but you get nervous about the hip. What Brandon Ayuk has going against him is he had this surgery just now. What he has going for him is most people realize core muscle surgery heals pretty routinely, and there's not a lot to examine. It's pretty reliable recovery with time. Now, in a normal year, that probably would hurt him more. Why? Because he knocked out of all the OTAs and off-season program, rookie minicamp and what have you. This year with COVID, it's almost a positive because he's going to come in whenever the season starts with everyone else ready to go. And so in a weird way, his surgery and timing in this year doesn't hurt him as much. If anything, helps him. I mean, if you, once again, you have a tie between 2 wide receivers and one is going to miss the off-season program and one's not, who are you going to take? But in this case, it probably doesn't matter.
Good stuff, Doc. Well, you
Great.
know, really,
Yeah.
What? Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, great knowledge, and the background is like putting me in a good place mentally. A palm tree and the sunset, and I hear some birds. In the
I was
background.
gonna say the birds chirping in the back. That was quite pleasant.
Well, it's actually a green screen and it's all fake. No, I actually decided with all the kids in the house, I didn't really have a safe haven, and so I figured going outside would be a safe haven.
No, it's really put me in like a zen place. I like it.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, Dr. Chow. That was awesome information, and keep enjoying. You live in San Diego, right?
I live in San Diego. Yes.
We're all jealous.
Come out and visit. I've
Yeah.
told you. And congratulations. The Establish the Run stuff has been great. You guys have been
Thanks,
great.
man.
Thanks a lot,
Doc.
Dr. Chow,
All right,
Thanks, Doc.
thank
Appreciate
you.
for
Bye-bye.
classing up the live stream. So let's get back to wide receiver though, because we didn't really stop there. And I think with what he was saying about Jerry Jeudy, we had a lot of questions about Jerry Jeudy. His over under, I believe on Bovada. Let me bring it up real quick. What was it? 11 and it's 12.5.
Yeah, this is one that one of my Canadian nemesis, Rob Pizzola, was over on the last few days. It got steamed into some sharp groups. And basically, originally you had saw almost like a media pushback on that knee stuff. And I saw like, oh, the Eagles are trying to drum it up. But the more you got the Dr. Chow analysis and the more I looked into it, it was actually something that could have somewhat of an impact on his status, especially when you've got such an insane wide receiver class.
And when you got Schefter talking about it, I mean, he doesn't carry water for teams.
Right. So to me, anything 11.5 or 12 on Jeudy, as far as taking it over there, I think it's still a good shot there. Even if you got to lay, minus 120, minus 130, minus 140 on a 12, I think that's playable because a lot of people have kind of landed on Lamb as wide receiver 1. Plus, we're thinking an early tackle run, so it's hard to see a lot of scenarios that Jeudy goes anywhere. Probably the earliest would be 12 to the Raiders, but dropping down.
There's really only one spot where you can get hurt, right?
Yeah.
And then on last week's show, we talked about the over under for wide receivers drafted in the first round. This morning, I took it at under 5.5 at plus 200. Because we were talking about on last week's show, there's so many of them that like maybe teams will feel like they can wait and like jump on an offensive tackle. Like you've said, Evan, it's a little bit more low risk. You're trying to hit doubles and singles perhaps in this draft. And you feel like, maybe we can get one at the top of the second round, or if you have 2 first-round picks, like a couple teams. I don't know, 5.5 over under wide receivers taken in the first round. And then who would those receivers be?
I think there are 4 virtual locks. What's worrying me is Denzel Mims slipping into the first round. And I know that, Scott, in your last mock, you had Denzel Mims going to the Packers. And then I looked at a mock that from someone that I respect recently, and Denzel Mims goes 30 to the Packers. And then Daniel Jeremiah has the Packers taking Brandon Ayuk. So that's a little bit scary there. I mean, are you still on that? Denzel Mims going in the first round, Scott?
Yeah, I think they're at the end of the draft right there in the first round. You can kind of have a little bit of interchanging with some of these receivers, whether it's Brandon Ayuk, Jalen Reagor, Denzel Mims. It's really just going to be what ends up being a fit or being a little bit more of a preference as far as the GMs. If we look at Daniel Jeremiah's draft that just dropped, he's got 6 in the first round. So he's got the big 4. He's got Jalen Reagor to New Orleans and Brandon Ayuk there to Green Bay. So there's some options there. For me, Denzel Mims is just right there kind of teetering on whether or not he's gonna get picked. I think when you start looking at some of the over and under on him, he's at 32.5. When you look at a lot of the scouting publications, he kind of falls in that 31 to 35 rank as far as like wide receivers. A few publications have him a little bit lower. So I think Denzel Mims is a guy that I could see going either way. I could see him in the first round. I could see him out of the first round. With the information we just got from Dr. Chow, Brandon Ayuk certainly makes a good case to be one of the receivers there that may take Denzel Mims' place.
Let's move on to running back. Let me find what I took this bet this afternoon, like right before we jumped on. All right. So it's first running back drafted. DeAndre Swift was the favorite. Jonathan Taylor is behind him. They didn't have Edwards-Helaire listed, and then Dobbins was third, and the field was plus 1,200. So that would be kind of betting on Edwards-Helaire to be drafted.
Yeah, this is one we totally crushed from last week, where when we did this show, there was Edwards-Helaire out there 20 to 1, 25 to 1. I got a 33 to 1. Everybody had him over 10 to 1. That has pretty much been absolutely hammered down. to most places are, 4-1, 5-1 on Edwards-Helaire. Gregor had a tweet today. He tweeted like 5 nuggets, and one was Swift and Helaire could go in the first round. I'd say more likely than the rest of the running back prop will go second or third. So he's right there as far as the first running back. The other thing is, I haven't heard there's a little bit of groupthink there, almost like a Kuda standpoint from a lot of people just placing Swift as their first running back. Whereas Scotty on this, have you heard a lot of teams? I just haven't heard that many teams. A lot of Swift buzz where I've heard Edwards-Helaire's name come up from a different number of places. I think Swift was kind of placed there as the best receivers, got the best burst, but from an actual buzz standpoint, I just don't hear his name out there very often. So I think we got a great price on Edwards-Helaire. I would just roll with it.
Yeah, from a buzz and just the information that you can find, there really hasn't been a lot of buzz on any of the running backs here in a draft coming up. I mean, you start looking at them, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire is the guy who's getting the most buzz, but is he going to go first? So the information from Peter Schrager was definitely nice to see. But two of the lines that I'm looking at right now on Bovada is the order of the first 3 running backs to get drafted. At plus 825, we have DeAndre Swift, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and then Jonathan Taylor. And then at plus 1300, you have DeAndre Swift, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and J.K. Dobbins. So I'm interested to get your thoughts on either one of those lines.
No, I like taking a little sprinkle. I think that Swift and Helaire 1-2. Again, once you get down to you start getting into the second round, and you add a little bit more variance. But I think that's kind of wholly looked at as now with the Schrager tweet and just what you've been hearing, that those two are going to be a 1-2. I don't mind taking a couple sprinkles there on some trifectas, having those two in a couple of certain orders there, especially if you're getting 8-1, 13-1, or a little bit better. Any thought now? Jeremiah's last mock, no running backs in the first round. To couple that with your thought of just not being a ton of running back buzz in general, are you guys in your final mocks going to have any running backs first round? Because I know you can get the under at somewhat of minus 150, minus 170 under if there's 0 running backs, under a half per se. Are you guys going to have a running back in your final first rounders?
I don't know about it. Yeah, I'm with Evan. I have 0. So no running backs going in the first round. And Jordan Love's also not going to go in the first round on my mock draft.
Tony Pauline has no running backs in picks 1 through 31. And then imagine losing that prop, 32 DeAndre Swift to the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to really. Honestly, I think Swift actually be a real nice fit with the Chiefs and kind of that system there. But outside of, looking 1 through 31 there, before you even get to KC, it's hard to make a case. Maybe 26 to Miami was one spot where a couple of earlier mocks had anybody. But you feel safe to say that there's not going to be one in the top 25. And then unless there's a trade up from 26 to 32, it's hard to find a spot of a team that would take a back outside of KC. So I think 32 is the only realistic option where if a guy's going to go without a trade up, that's probably it.
Yeah, I think an outside scenario that you could possibly see, and it's not a team that's really talked about because they do have some other needs, but Baltimore is a strange spot there with the Ravens, and you start looking at Mark Ingram. I don't think they have Mark Ingram locked up like super long. None of the other running backs that they really have, are just going to kill it and going to be that guy. So I think they're a very dark horse outside chance that maybe they could take a running back, but I'm still not even going to project that in any of my mocks.
Cool. Let's hit tight end, because this is from the last time we talked to this time. There's been this Cole Kmet shift of momentum there, where I felt good taking a couple of long shots, thinking that he wasn't a guy that you'd see in the top 40 or the top 50, and then you'd get into an area where anything can happen. But you had Chris Sims basically say that he thinks Kmet's the first round lock. You have DJ mock him to the Patriots at 23. You heard some even more buzz that people think that this is kind of like a late swell of momentum for Kmet. Are you guys going to have him in either of your first rounds? And I mean, I'm still not going to consider laying the chalk at the prices he's at first tight end. But where you leaning there from the tight end position?
I'm not. Maybe the Patriots take him in the second round, but I'm not going to have them taking him in the first round. And then Chris Sims, I mean, I like Chris Sims, but I don't. He's not a reporter, you know.
No, I know that was one. I mean, that would say I'm surprised. That was probably the most shocking thing I saw in DJ's mock was to have the Patriots taking him there at 23. Because even like you saw some props where the under on tight ends, like you could get if you went over one tight end in the first round, you could get like 3-1, 350. 400 to 1 on some of that as far as if there was going to be a tight end draft. And I still would lean that it's not. Could Kmet, a guy I see top of the second, you know, in the 30s go as far as his earliest scenario. I think that's more realistic than seeing him go 23.
Yeah, 23 to the Patriots is just like a pure need pick. And I mean, the Patriots are much likelier to just trade out of the first round.
Yeah.
Than to take Cole Kmet at number 23. I mean, watch me be wrong tomorrow, but I'll be fine being wrong, you know, based on that process.
Yeah, it'd also be a lot more interesting if you could get a real consensus on the rankings here. I mean, I've seen Adam Troutman, I've seen Cole Kmet, we talked Harrison Bryant, I've even seen Hunter Bryant as the top tight end. So it's not like Cole Kmet is just like entrenched there as like the top tight end and there's this huge drop off after him. All these guys are very similar. So I just don't see from either a talent evaluation or just even the positional value there for Cole Kmet to be a first round pick.
Yeah, on Saturday, you guys kind of convinced me to take Albert O at plus 1,100 to be the first tight end off the board, and now he's down to plus 550.
Yeah, there was some definite steam once we gave it out on Albert O and Harrison Bryant, but which were two guys that I would still, when they were, that's a key thing to bring up, when they were 20 to 1 and 16 to 1, when we talked last time, that's worth a sprinkle. Now when they're, 5 to 1 and they're 7 to 1 or 8 to 1, to me, especially when you couple that with the Kmet news that's going to come out there, I would pretty much leave the tight end position alone from a betting standpoint. I think the long shots that I liked have been bet down now. And you couple that with the Kmet news, but I'm still not interested in laying on him. If anything, maybe a little, Kmet 44.5, I saw was his over under at some places, 43.5, 44.5, maybe a smaller play and an under there. As now, seeing him go in the 30s wouldn't surprise me as much, but for the most part, I don't think there's a lot of action on tight end that I'm very interested in now a day before the draft.
Let me throw one at you though. Devin Asiasi from UCLA.
I saw this buzz.
Yeah, Brian brought us of he for a long time worked for the Dallas Cowboys. He was like essentially a GM in the NFL for a little bit, like a player personnel director. And I know that he has good information. He's given me good information in the past. And he tweeted today that he thought that Devin Asiasi could be an early day 2 pick. What's an early day 2 pick? An early second round pick. And that would position him to be the first tight end drafted if he were to, because I still don't think that anybody's going in the first round that plays tight end. So I think that Devin Asiasi, I mean, is there even a number on him? He really has not been talked about him.
I tell you what, and this will get in, I'm a Michigan fan here in the weeds. He originally went to Michigan. He was in line. He was going to be a star in that offense. Harbaugh loves utilizing the tight end. He had a great freshman year at Michigan. He moved up over and started playing over some highly recruited guys as a true freshman, was in line to be a legitimate, like we thought, going to be a number 1 tight end off the board. He was a block. He could catch. He got homesick. He transferred back to UCLA. UCLA brings in Chip Kelly, and he gets effed up in the system. He got put into an offense that didn't have a quarterback play and basically got forgotten about. But if you find a team that kind of digs up his old Michigan tape and couples that with the fact that it's a super weak tight end class, for me, if you would ask me last year, I would have told you that when he was at Michigan, before he transferred, he was a kid that was going to be a first round tight end in the NFL, or a 1 or 2 TE1 or TE2. His career kind of fell off when he transferred, but from a potential standpoint, he's got all the tools. He can block, he can catch, he had a good athleticism. He transferred to a shit situation in an offense that didn't have a passing game, and had some injuries and got forgotten about. But I don't, if you've got a site that lists him at, 50 to 1 or 100 to 1, throw 10, 20 bucks on it, and take a Hail Mary there.
All right. I asked for some final questions from the chat. We can kind of go lightning round with these if you guys want to.
Yeah, let's do that.
Sure.
All right. Evan Davis asks, Clyde Edwards-Helaire over under 47.5 draft position. He brings up the Buccaneers pick at 45, and maybe that would be a good match.
Awesome match.
Yeah, that's one that's been, it's kind of been out there in the media.
I say under. It scares me because the dude's 5'7" and he ran 4'6", and like when decision makers are on the clock, they're like, this dude's fucking 5'7", he ran 4'6". Not that I care about that, but I just feel like it could create an inherent bias. But from what we've heard, like, this dude has a chance to go late first round, and I think that 45 theoretically should be his floor with Tampa Bay.
Who goes first among offensive tackle, Josh Jones or Austin Jackson? Is that kind of the second tier of
Jackson? Yeah, it is the second tier. Jackson caught like this wave of buzz where you had DJ tweet out that he thinks he could go in the top 15. He's kind of a dude that never like super put it together at USC, but one of those high ceiling, high potential guys. He's got him 18 here in this I didn't see here if you saw a price on that, but I think Jackson, depending on what the line is there, I didn't hear you say a price, but I would go Jackson ahead of Jones, because I think Jackson's going to be, a mid to late round 1 guy, and Jones maybe sneaks in a round 1, probably more of a round 2 though. So if that's a reasonable price, I would take Jackson.
A lot of the guys with NFL connections, as far as the scouting community goes, tend to have Austin Jackson ranked ahead of Josh Jones. So, Josh Jones is kind of like started to slide down a little bit. He's got a few issues as far as his makeup, but Austin Jackson's a guy that athletically, all the tools are there. He had a little bit of a down season. There's a story that he donated some bone marrow to his sister and things like that. And that's part of the reason why he missed the entire all-season program there at USC. But I think he's a guy that has a skill set that scouts seem to love, with quick feet and stuff. They want to be a little bit tougher as far as anchoring down and stuff. But when you start looking at athletic ability for tackles, he's a guy I think scouts will love more than Josh Jones.
And I think that something that could happen is that first tier of offensive tackles, the 4 studs, they go really quick. I mean, they could all be gone by 10 to the Browns, or even 8 to the Cardinals. Like, I think they could all 4 of them could be gone conceivably by that position. And what that does is it elevates the second tier of offensive linemen, Austin Jackson, and
great point,
Josh Jones, and Cesar Ruiz. And again, these are singles and doubles, and I think they're just really strong picks, relative to what's going on in the NFL right now. And Austin Jackson went in the first of Daniel Jeremiah's mock, and he also went in the first of Tony Pauline's mock. He's going to be definitely in the first round of my mock.
So let me find this. Who goes first, Jacob Eason or Jalen Hurts at the quarterback position? Let me find the betting line for that.
I think Hurts has caught a lot of late steam here. Eason's one. I remember this was a throwback, but in Todd McShay's first mock that he did for the year, he had Eason going number 1 overall. I think he's one of the. I think somebody will take a shot on him with the potential, with the big cannon arm. But I think with a lot of teams realizing that mobility at the QB position is kind of a priority now. Like, the statue QB is slowly getting phased out, and you got to be able to move a little bit. And I would lean towards Hurts there. You guys have thoughts? I don't have a strong position on that.
I would tend to lean towards Hurts. I think somebody is going to look at Hurts, whether it be as a backup or as a project, what have you. And I think they're going to want to try to emulate what Baltimore has done with Lamar Jackson, especially some of these teams that don't really have a real connection towards who's going to come in and be their new starting quarterback with some of these veteran quarterbacks that are kind of past their prime and on their way out. So I think some of the things that Jalen Hurts brings, just, as a coach's son, played at Alabama, was successful, played at Oklahoma, was successful, and put up numbers in both of those offenses. I just tend to think that he's going to go ahead of a guy like Jacob Eason, who just really didn't do anything at Georgia and wasn't really exceptional at Washington.
Scott, where do you just touch on Jake Fromm for a minute? I had seen a few things from some of the scouting community. There's one guy that, former scout that had Fromm ranked 4th overall in this class. Had heard a little buzz that I got a text from somebody today that he thinks Fromm's going to go higher than anybody's expecting. I had some Fromm like over 45.5, over 47.5 that I maxed out. I thought he was a 3rd or 4th round guy at best that has no plus physical traits. Have you guys either heard anything on Fromm or had any, scouting evaluation on Fromm that would indicate that he's a 1st or 2nd round, but obviously probably not a 1st, but a 2nd round potential guy even?
Yeah, and just to update real quick on the line, right now Jacob Eason's over 49.5. You've got Jalen Hurts at 54.5. So Eason is set to go ahead of Hurts. It's just my personal opinion. I think Hurts might get a little bit more buzz for athletic ability. And then we talk about Jake Fromm. He's at 68.5. So that's where you're looking at your over under there. Look, the book on Jake Fromm is that he doesn't have plus athletic traits. He doesn't have the arm strength. He bombed the combine as far as the throwing drills. But what some scouts seem to see in Jake Fromm is that he's a guy you can develop as your number 2, and a guy that, instead of flaming out early in his career, is a guy that more likely will have a long-term backup role. A lot of scouts seem to like his makeup as far as like what he brings to the game mentally and things like that. But I think if you got him over at 45 or 48, whatever you said, I don't see him going anywhere within the first 2 rounds. I look at him more as like a 3rd or 4th round. And a lot of what scouts have said is he's basically a really poor man's version of Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, Colt McCoy without any athleticism. A dude named Vegas Jake Jack said that he has seen Devin Asiasi at 66-1 and 100-1 to be the first tight end selected. So, hey, you hit one of those and that makes your whole draft props process.
For sure.
Yeah. We already touched on a lot of these, like over under offensive linemen in the first round and wide receivers. So look back at the show. It'll be up on YouTube. You guys can check it out. Some guy named Alex Clark says, I guess this is a parlay for Wirfs as the first offensive lineman and then CJ Henderson as the first cornerback. He's got it at plus 3,300. I kind of like that bet as a parlay, but I don't know.
Well, you would need,
I don't know where you can find that.
Fault. I don't. It does. Listen, I'm not going to talk anybody up and throwing a couple bucks on but it's hard to see a scenario where Okudah is not CB1.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
Just from the fact that there's a lot of stuff. Reading Bob McGinn's profile on CJ Henderson, he really dogged it his last year at Florida. He had a really bad rep for tackling. He didn't get a lot of great reviews on what a competitor he was. I don't see a scenario where somebody, especially some of the teams that are up there, are gonna take Henderson over Okudah. So
yeah, that makes sense.
That would be a pass for me.
Yeah, it was quite scary.
There's been kind of a rumor about CJ Henderson that he has this allergy, and this allergy is to contact. Go ahead, Scott. Sorry.
Yeah, it was scary to read that and see him get so many comparisons to Justin Gilbert out of Oklahoma State a few years ago, who was out of the league in 3 years.
I'll tell you what, though, man. On Lombardi did a podcast today. He's done like 2 in the last 3 days, and he's just going back and forth with Boomer Esiason, and it's great. But he mentioned CJ Henderson and the Lions in the same breath. He was like, there are way more teams than you guys know that has CJ Henderson ahead of Jeff Okudah. Again, Gil Brandt had Okudah as only the 13th overall player. Jay Glazer said the same thing in his mailbag today, that It's close. It's way closer to 50-50 between CJ Henderson and Jeff Okudah than you guys think.
Yeah, the big difference with those guys is just going to be the speed. When you start looking at Henderson running a 4.37, and it's going to be, just from a matchup standpoint. One of the things to look at is how many coaches really give two shits how good that their cornerbacks can tackle. I remember Fred Smoot couldn't get up 225 on the bar one time at the damn combine. So some of these cornerbacks, if they can go ahead and mirror and have man coverage and make plays on the ball, I think they'll overlook some bad tackling from time to time.
All right, we didn't talk much linebacker on this show. Ryan Ramstack asks, who goes first between McQueen? Is that DeMichael McQueen and Oklahoma's Kenneth Murray? And then
Queen, bro, Patrick Queen.
Patrick Queen.
Yeah.
Wait! Did you say this is Ryan Ramczyk that's going ahead and asking those questions? Is this the Saints right tackle trying to get some draft information?
Guys, I introed this whole thing saying I know nothing about football. All right, he says McQueen.
It's
a tough linebacker is such a scheme specific.
Thanks for saving me, Joe.
Thing that it's hard to really pinpoint, because you're talking about which team's going to go linebacker and then which scheme does he fit. I've heard some good things about Kenneth Murray from a leadership and a characteristic and a trait perspective. So that would be, I would lean towards Murray in that, going, a little bit higher. I saw, Jeremiah's got Murray to the Eagles at 21. And he doesn't got McQueen going to the Ravens until 28. So I think Murray's, depending on, again, price matters there, depending on what you're getting, but I would lean towards Murray. But again, linebacker, it has to be a fit for what the team needs too, and the team wanting to take a backer.
And just a note here on Patrick Queen. Look, I watched a lot of Patrick Queen. I'm a big LSU fan down here in Louisiana, and Patrick Queen wasn't even starting at the beginning of the season. And he wasn't a guy that the coaching staff trusted to be able to go ahead and call the plays there on defense and be the leader of defense. Patrick Queen has really parlayed the last 5 games that you saw in a huge game there against Clemson in a championship game and decent workouts and decent speed into being a first-round pick. So I think when you start looking at their makeups, I think throughout the interview process, and you heard just, scouts and some of these other guys in the media gloat and actually say that Kenneth Murray is the best interview that they have had in the last 10 years, as far as just combine interviews with teams and whatnot. And it's not just one particular outlet or one particular group saying that. It's come from a lot of scouts and people in the industry. So I think with that, and you start looking at Raiders and Mike Mayock, I think that's a good fit for him, especially with Mayock liking guys that have, good character, strong leaders and things like that. I think Murray's going to be a good shot to go before Queen.
All right, I think this is a good one to go out on, because I know you guys have mock drafts to finalize, and I got to go to bed. The exact order of the first 3 wide receivers drafted, and this is a bettable prop. So, you start, Evan. You're muted. You start, Joey.
This one's got a total curveball in there now. From part of it's the Judy knee news, and part of it, Jeremiah having Jefferson going in there. So I don't blame anybody if you want to take a trifecta and either have Judy third or Judy out altogether. I know there's a couple places that had some really, really long shot prices if you want to place Judy third or Judy out of it and put Jefferson in there. So then, you can, sprinkle, a couple of bucks on a couple of trifectas with either Judy out there. I would say Lamb wide receiver 1, Ruggs wide receiver 2, and then I would still say Judy wide receiver 3. But if I was going to place a bet from a value standpoint, I'd take the Jefferson wide receiver 3 from the trifecta, because you're going to get a pretty sick price on that.
That's plus 1,800 on Bovada, Lamb, Ruggs, Jefferson.
Nice.
That'd be more what I'd be looking for there as far as, taking a shot.
Scott, the exact order of the first 3 wide receivers drafted.
Yeah, I'm right there with Joey. I think it's going to be Lamb 1. I like Ruggs and just the buzz that you've been hearing as far as the speed and some teams that just clamor for that. I think you could possibly see somebody trade up to get Ruggs and just with the information that we had, and also with Judy being more of a slot receiver and how is he going to fit into certain teams' offenses and how are they going to go ahead and look at using them. That's the order I'm going to go ahead and have. So it's going to be Lamb's wide receiver 1, Ruggs wide receiver 2, and Judy at 3.
Evan?
Yeah, same for me. And I completely agree with Joey regarding, if you could get Jefferson to be the 3 after Lamb and Ruggs, that sounds like a great bet at 18-1.
And on Bovada, Lamb, Ruggs, Judy is plus 650 too. You could sprinkle a little
Not
bit on
bad.
both of those,
You bet both, yeah.
and have some fun tomorrow night. All right. Thanks so much, guys, for doing this again. I wish we could do it every week, but we have to figure out something else to talk about. I feel like it's going to be dark times for the entire
Yeah.
sports world after this weekend, man.
It is.
What are we going to do?
Be doing an esports mock draft next week.
I'm not interested. We'll figure something out. All right. Thanks so much, guys.
Awesome. Good show, man. Good luck, guys,
All
tomorrow.
right. Take it easy.